Okay, so in this episode we are going to be talking about stateful widgets. Okay, so earlier we said that we have stateless and then stateful widgets, and then we have used some examples, or we have seen some usage of stateless widgets. Now let's look at stateful widgets. Now when we say stateful widget, it means the widget has a state. What is a state? It means it has properties or data that can change during the life cycle of that widget. Okay, so let's actually get to it so that I can explain properly. So I'll just create a stateful widget. I'll get, say, home page. So use this to home page. Oh, sorry, home page. Now let me explain this. Let's compare stateless widgets down here too. Now when you look at these two, this is stateful and then this is stateless. You can see the stateless only has the constructor and then the build method to build your widget. But when you look at the stateful method, the stateful widget, it has the constructor, okay, and then it has a create state method, okay. So this creates the mutable state for this widget at a given location in the tree. Okay, let's not get to this. So this framework can call this method multiple times over the lifetime of a stateful widget. For example, if the widget is inserted into the tree in multiple locations, the framework will call a separate state object for each location. Okay, fine. So what this thing simply means is that this thing creates a space or somewhere in memory that stores data for this widget. So this is the widget, this is the widget itself, okay, but then this is the data in which the widget is stored. This is the data which is stored in the widgets. There, this is the state, okay, and this is the widget. So as you can see, home page extends stateful widget, and then home page state extends a state, okay. State is information that can be read synchronously when the widget is built and might change during the lifetime of the widget, okay. So when we say state, it simply means any information that can change within your widget. So if, let's say, you are performing a basic calculation like 2 plus 2, initially there's no answer, okay, so the answer is blank. Immediately you get 2 plus 2 and you get 4, the state of that variable storing 4 has changed, okay. And so this build method in the state is called so that it will rebuild the entire widget and then update the state. So let's just get into it. We are going to see it right now. So here I'm going to use my scaffold as usual, and inside this I'm going to put a column to the child, body. I'm going to use a column. I think we will understand better when we do. So just put then title, text, stateful. Okay, so this is going to have children, and then the children, the first one is going to be test, and So I'll put that there, and I'll put what, another text widget, and then I'll put a filled button, and the child should be a text that says increase. Okay, and here let's quickly look at this. Inside this state, okay, not the widget, inside the state, we are going to create a variable. So do it outside the build method. So here I'll create a variable called, you can just use var to create the variable, or if you want, I will just say integer. So int value is equal to 0. So this is going to be a very long video. So this value is equal to 0, so I'll just put value here, but value is an integer, but text only takes strings, so I can just put to string over here. Okay, good. Now if I build this, I think, I should put the home page into the main. So inside here we are going to have our home to be the home page. Okay, so this is what we have now. This is not nice. So abba center title to, okay, so you're going to, let's wrap this inside the center. So inside the center, so I think it should come, and then this main axis alignment, just put it in the center. Let's see. Okay, so this is what we have. Click the button to see magic. I think it's way too small. Why? Style. There's textile that, sorry, okay. How can I resize this? Okay, so let me just copy this whole thing and then put it inside here. Okay, so we have this, and then all right, so let's do that. Let's make this 30. Okay, so what the logic is that when I click on this, it should increase, okay, by 1. Now let me show, sorry, let's go to our terminal, and then where is this debug console? Okay, I'll clear everything here. Let's go back to that basics. So just like any programming language, you have print statement, so that just uses print, and then you put whatever you want to print in quotes. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. This is the on press. That means when you click on this button, what should happen? Okay, this like an event listener. So when you click on this, what should happen? So here we are going to test it out by saying print button tapped. Okay, so I'll save the changes. I'll clear. So now when I tap on it, you see button tapped here. Okay, that means this function, this click thing is working. As you can see, I've tapped on it 4 times, so you see it's changing. Okay, now we have our variable we created above here, which is called value. Okay, so what we want to do is that when you click on value, we want to increase value by 1. So just say value plus plus. You already know that, or value is equal to value plus 1. You already know that, but let's just stick to, or you can even do value plus equal 1, no space. Sorry, still the same thing. These are ways to increment a value, but let's just do value plus plus. Now when you click on this, the value here is what is supposed to increase, right? Now the value does not increase, even though we are calling the value to be displayed here on this line in this test. But what we want is that, let me add bold. So what we want is that, okay, you see now the value has changed. Let me restart the app. This is not what I wanted to show you. Okay, now we are back to 0. So what, no, so you can see the logic. When we click on this, this is supposed to increase, right? But it is not increasing. So inside here, you can even do this. You can even print the value here and say print value, right? Don't worry, the print takes an object, so you can pass any data type here. Oh, why did I? No. I want to restart. See the 0, right? Now when I click on this thing, it should increment the value by 1. So okay, good. So increment the value by 1 and then print the value. So when I click on this, you can see the value has increased by 1. Okay, but here it is not reflecting. If I go again, the value is now 2. It is not reflecting. So I can click 50 times, it wouldn't show, even though the function is working. Okay, but it is not showing. Why? Because this widget is stateful, and if you want to use or update changes to values or information or data in a widget that is stateful, you need to rebuild the whole widget again so that it shows the new value. But the thing is that Flutter is so fast that you wouldn't even see the rebuild, like microseconds. So you wouldn't even see. All you see that is that the change has reflected. Okay, now let's go back to this. Is it build method? Okay, so describes the part of the user interface represented by this widget. The framework calls this one. Okay, so immediately anything changes, or I mean the entire widget is here. So the design, the code for your widget, everything is inside this build method. Okay, so when you say build, just like say build a house, I've given you the structure. So build a house. So this is how you've arranged your house. So this is your scaffold. You have the up bar, the center, the column, the text. This is that it has been displayed here. Okay, so this is inside the build method. Now also inside the build method, we have value here. Okay, the same value is here, and here we are just saying that print or display the value of that value, display the data of that value inside this test, which is this. But now we are clicking on this and we want it to change, and it is not changing. Now our value is 7. So what do? We need to call a function that will cause this whole method to rebuild again. Okay, so when it builds again, it doesn't throw away the data in it, but it holds the data and then make changes to that portion of the app or wherever the change occurred. So to do that, okay, let me show you something real quick. You see, now I have my value up to 7. Okay, one difference between stateful and stateless widget is that immediately this app rebuilds in a stateful widget, the value will still remain 7. The data will not be lost. But if it is a stateless widget, that is, let me just convert this to a stateless. Oh, why? It won't go. I should be able to convert this to a stateless widget. Okay, don't worry. So I'll create a stateless widget here. So I'll just call it my widget and I'll copy the entire build code here into it. So I'll copy everything here and paste it here, and I'll have what int value is equal to 0. What is this? No, so I should just remove the constant. Okay, so I'm just going to replace this thing, the home page, with, where is it, my widget. So it's the same widget. Okay, let me just change the color of this one. Let me just change this one's name to increment. Okay, so that you see that there's a difference. Now when I click on this, the change doesn't occur, but you can see the value increase here. Okay, now the value is up to 4, right? If I hot reload this, or if I restart this, or let me do hot reload and then increment again, the value starts again from 0 to 1. Okay, hot reload simply rebuilds the widget. Okay, so anytime I click, the value changes. Now we are up to 10. This is what is happening, up to 10. But if I hot reload, the value will be lost, and when I click, it will start from 1 again. Okay, that means it does not have a state, it doesn't store any information. But then if we are to use this our home page, so I think you understand now. So let's go back to use my home page here. Home page. Now this is for the home page. What happens is that, okay, let me just change this to stateful, stateless. This thing can be very confusing. That's why I'm spending a lot of time on this. Now this is the stateful widget. So let me save again and let me clear all this. If I click, the value should increase by 1 here in the console. So this is it. It has increased by 1, 2, 3. Now when I now the value is 3. When I reload this to reload the changes, you see we have 3. Okay, it shows here. It continues from 4. You see, it doesn't discard all the data, so the data is kept in memory. Okay, so you don't lose the data. Now as you keep going, now we're up to 8. Before the change appears here, this build method has to be called, or the whole widget has to be rebuilt. Okay, and if I call hot reload, it will call this build, so the 8 will reflect it. But we don't want that, because when you build your app and someone is using it, the person is not connecting your app to VS Code to run hot reload before they see the changes. So there's this method, or there are several methods that can be found inside a stateful widget. Okay, so in a state and then we can use we can use those methods to perform several functions. Okay, so inside here I'm going to use one of the methods, and that method is called set state. Well, it can confuse you. Let me say set state. Now this is set state. It's a function or it's a method. So set state, and then you bring your here. You can just put this here like this, and then put whichever function to follow it. This is an arrow function, so I can just put this one here, and when I run this, it will simply mean that call this function and then pass. This function also takes a function, okay, inside it. This function takes a function. So when we call this set state, it will call this function or this method here or this increment thing here. This is not the best way to do it. So set state, you can do this and then pass it inside. No, but then it's an anonymous function, so it allows you to call in another function. So I'm going to open up this space, okay, and inside this space I'll put another bracket, okay, and then you can either put the arrow thing here. The arrow function is used if you are going to return a one line. This arrow simply means that return, okay. So if your whole function or method or whatever you are doing is on a single line without semicolons, you can put this arrow function here. We'll get to it later. But if it is not, just put this thing here. So let me close this. Just put this thing here. So this thing here in Flutter just denotes a function, okay, an anonymous function. So it simply means that set state takes, you see, set state is a function, and then its parameter is also a function, okay. So void function. So set state inside it takes a function, okay, as its parameter. So this is the definition: void function and then void function. And then this is an example. Okay, so let's go. I'll put this thing here, and then I'll put this thing here. So our method that we want to execute is going to be inside this function. Now inside this curly bracket. Now I don't want this to happen, okay. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to restart it. This is restart. It's simply start your app from scratch, okay. So now you see when you click, nothing happens. It is still 0. Now we are going to call the increment function here and say value plus plus, okay. Okay, good. So when we call the value plus plus inside set state, this simply means that change or make this value reflect in your app. When you call this set state, it simply means that, you see, notify the framework that the internal state of this object has changed. Whenever you change the internal state of internal state of a state object, make the change in a function that you pass to set state. Make the change in a function that you pass to set state. So I'm looking for something. So what happens is that, so calling set state notifies the framework that the internal state of this object has changed in a way that might impact the user interface, okay, in this subtree, which causes the framework to schedule a build for this state object. If you just change the state directly without calling state, the framework might not schedule a build and the user interface might not be updated to reflect the new state. So what this simply means is that anytime you call this method, you put a set state here. What happens is that this method is going to run again, okay, and when it runs, that means build your widget again, and it is going to build with the new values or the new data that has changed, okay. Now we have this to be 0, and then when we call set state, initially this should be 0, but when you do this, it automatically reflects here. It also prints here for you to see. Okay, so calling this set state simply means that rebuild the widget and then show the new data. Okay, so immediately I call this, the changes happen, and then you don't even see a blank, right? It happens so fast that you wouldn't even see it. So this is basically one of the most useful methods in a stateful widget. Now let's go back and then let's change that. We are not changing. Let's go back here and then let's try to call set state here and see what happens. Set state. What happens? We get an error. Okay, because this set state is not found in a stateless widget. It doesn't have a state. Stateless. It doesn't have a state, so there's no state for you to set. Okay, so you can't even use this method in a stateless widget. That is one thing I want you to know. So if you are doing calculations or anything that will require something to change on your screen, don't use a stateless widget. Use a stateful widget. Now let's come back to our stateful widgets again. Now there are some instances where you might want to perform some function before the screen loads. Okay, so right now, and those functions, there are a lot of functions in this state in this state object. Okay, so the first one I'm going to look at is the init state. So we are going to say at override and say init. Okay, it is coming. So init state, this calls super.init state. This super.init state goes all the way back to the home page state. Okay, so don't worry yourself about this, but it should be here. Now you can do your operations here or here, so far as they are all in the init state. Maybe I'm lying. Now here we can do something like, let me restart the app. I'll restart it again. That you see the initial value is 0 that we've created for the state. We can do something like this. Init state simply means that this framework will call this method exactly once for each state object it creates. This override this method to perform initialization. That depends on the location at which this object was inserted in. This simply means that before this build method will run, okay, do some things before this build method runs. This means that before this widget even shows on your screen, what is going to happen here? Okay, what should happen if you want to do some calculations before you display the widget or whatever? You can do all that in the init state. Okay, so here I can say value. We already have value, so before the widget starts, I can assign the value of 10 to this variable. Okay, so that before the widget starts, even though we have an initial value of 0, this 10 is going to override this. Okay, and then the 10 is going to reflect here. So let's restart our app. So we immediately restart our app. This method is called, okay, and then increases the value of this value variable before it comes to the build method. So before it comes to the build method, it is already carrying a value of 10. So you're just going to insert the 10 directly here into your build. Okay, so if you call increment, what do you think is going to happen? Is it going to increment from 0 or is going to increment from 10? So let's see. Do you get it? So this init state is actually used to perform some functions before your widget is built. And we have dispose. I mean, most of you should be familiar with dispose. Dispose simply means that if you have any data you don't want to use anymore, you should dispose them. You should just throw them away, especially in cases where you are going to close this widget. Dispose simply means that release all the resources, every memory. Okay, every widget you create on your screen takes memory, your phone's RAM, your memory. Okay, so the more things you put in there, the more memory your app is going to take. So after you are done, using your widget, let's say you are going to go to the next page, you are going to do something else that does not require the widget again, call dispose. And if there's any value you want to, this integers and when they are not disposed, okay, but what you can do is you can say value is equal to now. Oh, it doesn't even take now, sorry. So you can say value is equal to 0. That means you are resetting the value. Okay, but then this is not even going to work, because this simply means that throw away everything inside here. Okay, so this is not even going to work. So basically this dispose method is used to clean up. So let's see, called when this object is removed from the tree permanently. The framework calls this method when the state object will never build again. After the framework calls dispose, the state object is considered unmounted, and then the mounted property is set to false. If it is an error to call set state, it is an error to call set state at this point. The stage of this life cycle is terminal. There's no way to remount a state object that has been disposed. So, one more thing. Subclasses should override this method to release any resources retained by this object. Example, stop any active animations. What else? If any change is happening, just stop it. So I think this is one concept of stateful and then stateless widgets. So I really hope you get this, but it will make sense as we get along. Okay.